Hi, my name is Desi, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make this mixed media tag. The tag itself is made using the top of a tissue box. But before I begin the tutorial, I'm going to just show you what the finished product looks like. The tag is sturdy and has a lot of decorating space. This is the tissue box that this tag came from. But there are lots of other different types of tags around if you look at different tissue boxes. This tag is definitely not a pre-made tag, it's definitely the one from the top of the box. When I finish my projects I use Micador fixative, however I didn't realise that the fixative makes some ink run and it made the stays on ink run, but it doesn't affect VersaFine or Distress inks. So if you're going to use a fixative, be wary of that. Okay, let's begin. The top of the tissue box has a shiny side and a matte side, and it's got a large hole in the top. I need to prime it before I can actually paint on it, and I want to get rid of that hole. My solution is to use a piece of Kraft brown paper bag to create my base layer and to cover that hole and add strength to the tag overall. I'm going to use Mod Podge paper and this Distress brush to paint with. It is different from all of my other Distress brushes. It has a much coarser bristle, very inflexible, impossible to paint with, so it's become my default glue brush. Mod Podge paper is pretty good for adhering down collage elements, but I don't use it for anything else. Now, no matter how much smoothing out I do, I still get air bubbles, and I think that's just part and parcel with using craft paper that's been creased up like this. And my solution to getting rid of the air bubbles is to use a tool that I got from Etsy for polymer clay, and this is the tool. It has a felt side and a nice handle, and I can use that to smooth my paper out. There are other tools around that do this, but I really like that tool. I also have this scraper from scrapbook.com, and that's really nice and flexible, and that works well too. But if you want a tool like that, it's a polymer clay tool. So I'm going to prime my craft paper with golden gesso. I've never used golden gesso before. I ran out of my Finnabair white gesso, and so this is a bit of an experiment for me too. The first thing I noticed about this particular gesso is that it's much grittier than the Finnabair gesso, and it's really, really white, and that freaks me out. So I grab a baby wipe there and try and smudge it out a bit so it's less white. But really, at the end of the day, it is still extremely white. I'm going to cover up some of those oil spots and things from the bag. I also want to leave some of that bright white visible so that I can get a different layer of depth to colour, because I know that the wider sections are going to pull lighter when I layer ink over the top than the paler sections. I'm drying it off because I'm working quickly. Normally I would do 10 tags at a time and prime them, and then once the first tag is dry I work on that, so I don't always use a craft dryer. After feeling the dry tag I still think that it needs a bit more priming, but I'm a bit afraid of that really bright white primer, so I'm going to use the Finnabair clear gesso. I've just used the brush that I white primed with, so the clear is not very clear, it's still a little bit white, but you can see the top corner there has remained clear. So Finnabair clear gesso is really good, it will literally be clear. I don't know what I'm going to do with the tag yet. I'm still deciding. I really like this tiny little stamp set that I got from the op shop. This is another stamp set that kind of lives on my desk. I really like the flowers in this particular stamp set, and I know that I'm going to use one of the flowers eventually. I just don't know which at this point in time. I also have these some scrap paper from packaging, and I think, oh, that was a really nice background. I could just use that, but it's really thick, and my tag's already starting to look pretty chunky, so I don't want to add another thick layer, so that gets taken away. I've also have some masterboard ready to go that I've used on that junk journal, and I could just cut a piece of masterboard out and place it on top, but you know, I don't want to do that either because it's quite thick too. So this is my scrap pile, bits and pieces that I've cut out of books and die cutting and whatever, And as I'm flicking through it, I realize that the architectural forms in these illustrations are really good for this tag. I think there's one there that is almost the shape that I want, and there it is, and I'm like, I think I'm going to use that as my main sort of piece in the background there. At this point in time, I don't know if I'm going to use the whole oval piece of paper that I eventually cut out, or if I'm just going to use a little bit. But what I do is I always take a template, cut everything out, and then I sort of fiddle around to see how it's going to look. I decide I really don't like those edges, I don't like all the white space, so I'm actually going to chop it all out. And then I think, well, it actually is going to look heaps better if I cut out all the little details as well. I believe Tim Holtz calls this fussy cutting, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fussy cut out all the white space because I don't like it. This is a mixed media tag. I do like to be very grungy. No white, please. I've gone to my favorite thing in the whole world for painting up tags, and they are Distress Oxide inks. Sorry, these are Distress Oxide sprays. And very predictably, I reached my two favorite colors, which is Evergreen Bough and Weathered Wood. I love these two colors. I love how they work together. However, on craft paper, they blend down a little too much. They both have that gray undertone, so they merge and become almost like one color when you use them on craft paper. Even though they look different wet, they do soften and fade. These spray vaporizers from Ranger ink have a really nice fine spray. They're probably the best vaporizer spray I've used, and I've got a few cheaper ones, but that one is top notch. I like that one a lot. I really don't like the way the white gesso, the golden gesso, doesn't seem to want to take color, so I reprime over the top with the Finnabair clear. It does take off some of the color and smears it around a little bit. And so what I have now is I have a very fully primed piece of craft paper that is quite rough, and you can see the texture in that background there, and I'm going to re-layer colors over the top. So I'm also going to use Crackling Campfire, and I'm moving that into the center because I'm trying to create a focal point. And I'm layering those colors, and you can see that there's a bit of Evergreen Bough at the bottom, there's the Crackling Campfire, and there's the Weathered Wood. And I don't try and shift it around too much, I just try and keep it as central as I can. And you can see there that it's all dried down. I've got a much nicer finish. I've got a little bit of a distress sort of thing happening there, where the Crackling Campfire and the Weathered Wood and Evergreen Bough have mixed together, and it's caused this little brown sort of oxidized look. I really like that look. I'm really happy with the way that tag is now backgrounded. There is that white spot at the bottom though, that just didn't want to come out. I'm just saying that I don't usually use Crackling Campfire with this color combination. I'm very much a fan of pink and green together, and Spun Sugar is probably my favorite. So from here I'm going to use StazOn and a foam blending brush to blend the edges out. I could use a distress color, but I like this color. It's StazOn in Ganache, and it's just a really, really nice brown. I don't have a detailed brush for those edges. I just use a hog hair bristle brush. It's not great because the bristles are quite splayed, so you're going to get ink where you don't really want ink, but you know what? It's distress. I'm just going to go for it. So I'm positioning it, trying to work out what more I want to do, and I think I'm going to do more on the background. It doesn't look busy enough for me. I really like busy backgrounds. I also, for someone who likes a lot of distress muted colors, I really love sparkle, and so I'm going to use embossing powder. I always say enameling powder, but it's actually embossing powder, to create a image in the background. I'm using Versamark to create a flower pattern that I'm going to stick embossing powder to, and I'm going to use two different color embossing powders. that first little tub is my embossing powder sort of leftovers. It's got a bit of Lindy's Stamp Gang in there. It's got a little bit of clear. It's got a bunch of white-based embossing powders. I made a massive faux pas there, and I rubbed the embossing powder over the back of my design, losing the stamped images that I have. The tag itself is also quite wet as well, so the pattern is gone. And what I'm left with is this very, I guess, almost like old paint that you see on, you know, weathered buildings effect with the embossing powder. And I actually quite like it. It would have looked better with the flowers, and you can see some flower design is at the top, but I really like the way it's working here. It has a bit of a green reflection, and that'd be from one of the Lindy's Stamp Gang embossing powders in there. And you can see that the weathered wood embossing powder has created a really nice green halo effect down the bottom. But that spot at the bottom there, that clear spot, is still resisting, and that was where the golden the golden white gesso was. So I'm going to hide that spot because it's bothering me heaps. So I've moved the image all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to use gathered twigs and this stamp set to stamp the background a little more. This is a really old Stampin' Up! Stamp set. I just like the font. I love that scripty open font. It's my favorite, and I've got heaps of font stamps, and I still go back to that one. You can see it there. And I'm just going to stamp randomly all over. I usually use VersaFine Onyx to stamp with, and failing that, I usually use Vintage Sepia, but my Vintage Sepia is it's gone funny, so I need a colour that's not going to be multicolored, and that is Gathered Twigs, which is a nice warm brown. I'm smudging some of the Gathered Twig ink onto the embossing powder there, and by smudging it, it's caused the embossing powder to go a bit matte and lose its shine, and when I re-stamp over it, you can actually see that the ink takes now instead of resisting on the embossing powder. So that's a little trick. If you want it to appear, just rub it in and stamp it again. At this point in time, you could probably leave the tag just like this, punch a hole, and you've got a really nice tag ready to go. But I like things to be really busy and over the top, so I'm going to do some more. So my tag looks pretty good. The back still needs to be done. Unfortunately, my video cut out before I could finish recording the back. That'll be a video for another time, I think. So I'm still working on placement. I'm still trying to figure out what the finished look and feel of this tag is going to be. I'm not going to use Mod Podge to glue the cutout down. I like to use Aleene's Tacky glue. It's a very, very good glue. It doesn't smear, smudge, it dries very quickly, and it sticks down things to anything. So it's a great, great glue. I highly recommend it if you're looking for a really good glue that adheres paper to any sort of paper medium. So I'm just thinking, what else do I need? And I know that I need a focal point, so I'm going to use some washi tape to create a focal point. I like this one from Finnabair. I've ripped the washi tape quite funny, so it's not sticking on its own, but that's okay. It gives me an excuse to add in another element. I don't like that nice neat edge, so I'm ripping it off a little bit. And I'm going to use Ranger's white texture paste in the Crackle finish. To make anything crackle, it needs to be put on thickly. So I've layered it on fairly thickly in order for the crackle to appear. Remember, it's white, so you do need to colour over it. I'm also going to use some Distress Grit paste, and I'm going to add that to the edge of the tag as well. You can see there the inks have blended in with the pastes, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. I'm using a product called Prills here to add a little more texture. They are glass beads, micro beads with no hole. Prills is the brand name. There are lots of other types of these beads out there. So I'm going to use a spoon, and I'm going to heat up my crackle paste there and my grit paste. I have dabbed it into a pile of embossing powder, and I'm going to use that to adhere those prills down to the tag. So the embossing powder and the paste acts like a glue. So rather than introducing another glue, you can use what you already have. However, you've got to be careful and you've got to do it really slowly, because grit paste and crackle paste will bubble up when heated too much. And you can see that there are some bubbles there that I'll have to get rid of. But all in all, it looks pretty good. And those prills are really adhered. I would really have to take a knife to them and scrape them off to get them off. I'm just showing you the different kinds of inks that I would use to do some stamping. This VersaFine sepia ink I've had for 11 or 12 years. I've re-inked it a couple of times, and somewhere around the tracks it's gotten water damaged or heat damaged, and it no longer is one colour. It prints in two different colours. I actually have a newer ink pad, but I really like that two different colour thing. It's kind of grown on me after all these years. So now I'm thinking edges, holes. It's a very sturdy tag. I can definitely punch a hole, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to attack it with the, I think this is a big hole punch by We Are Memory Keepers. And I'm also going to set an eyelet as well, because I love the way an eyelet looks on the top of a tag. And there's the back of the eyelet, and you can see there that you've got the splayed end, which is nice. I like that flower effect that you get, and you've also got the nice smooth end there. You can see I'm pointing to an ugly bit where I overheated that grit paste, and I'm going to tear it off. I'm going to use my Ranger embossing dabber to add some more embossing fluid there, dip it in some of the leftover embossing powder that I've got, and there you go. Ugly bit gone. No more ugly bits. I'm going to use my craft knife to distress the edges. By distressing the edges of the paper, it gives my Stays-On ink and ganache a lot more sort of space to soak in, and so you can see there's a very distinct brown frame around the edge of the tag. This is recycled Sari chiffon. I got this off Etsy. You can find loads of sellers selling it, and I'm just using that to tie off the tag. I'm using a distress crayon in Evergreen Bough to colour up some of that grit and texture paste, the crackle texture paste, because remember they are white and I don't want it to be too white. So I'm just smudging the crayon in. Smudging, is that a word? Smudging the crayon in, and sort of rubbing it with my finger to bring out all the little details. This is a piece of very, very thin washi tape that has butterflies on it. And it comes from eBay in China. Chinese makers have lots of this kind of washi tape, and I'm just cutting it out, and I'm going to adhere the butterfly on. Because it's so transparent, I'm not sure how it's going to look, but I'm pleasantly surprised by the way it glues down and looks. It actually looks a little too clean, so I'm going to use my baby wipe that has inks and colour on it, add a bit of water to that baby wipe, and it's going to transfer some of the colour onto the washi tape. Not enough to really change the tape, but enough to make it look a little like it's always been there. Adding a little more of the crayon around the edges of the butterfly and smushing the colour in. A bit of Sizzix Pearlescent medium for the butterfly. I think this jar is going to last me forever because I only use such a tiny amount. As you can see there, teeny tiny amount, rubbing and blending it in, and you get just a very subtle sparkle. This is a Tim Holtz book of sayings. I like this particular book. I'm distressing the edges with, again, that Stays-On ganache, a little bit of grey cotton thread to create a little focal point down the bottom there with the butterfly. And I'm going to use Cosmic Shimmer glitter glue. There's no glitter in this glue. It is just a very strong, very clear glue, so it dries transparent and it is super strong. You can see that I've only used the teeniest tiny amount, and then I've spread that around, and it will adhere that very fine cotton easily. This glue is also great for when you've got stickers that won't stick, And in this case, you know, I've just taken off some of the adhesive from the back by over handling the sticker. And this particular glue sticks things down. For some reason, I did not use glue to stick the top one down. I just thought I would use my fingernail in it and try and really jam it down, giving it more of a distressed look as well. And that's stuck down, I think, fairly firmly. I think what I do next is a little bit off camera, but I take that Neef brush there, the hog hair brush, and I use it to burnish the sticker down. And what I mean by that is I'm actually rubbing some of the shine off the sticker using the back of that paintbrush. Obviously you don't have to do that, it's just something I've chosen to do. At this point, I think my front of my tag is finished, but I do go and make some changes later. Thanks for watching.